Have you ever wondered what happens when someone tries to hide what they've seen? When the eyes that witnessed something so terrible must be sealed forever? In 1892, in the misty hills of North Carolina, two sisters were found with their eyes sewn shut. But the question that haunts investigators to this day isn't who did this to them, but why they may have done it to themselves. Before I continue with this disturbing account, take a moment to comment where you're from. This channel needs your support to continue uncovering these forgotten horrors. Subscribe now to ensure these dark truths aren't lost to history once again. The case of the Blackwood sisters began on October 12, 1892, when a local hunter named Elijah Monroe stumbled upon an abandoned cabin 8 miles east of Asheville, North Carolina. What was meant to be a routine hunting expedition turned into a discovery that would haunt Buncombe County for generations to come. Monroe later gave his account to the Asheville Citizen-Times. "I smelled it before I saw anything, like copper and rot. Thought maybe a deer had died nearby. But when I pushed open that cabin door..." His statement trails off in the official records with a notation that the witness needed several minutes to compose himself before continuing. Inside the remote cabin, Monroe discovered the bodies of twin sisters Elizabeth and Eleanor Blackwood, both 23 years of age. They were seated facing each other in wooden chairs in the center of the room. Both women were dressed in identical white nightgowns, their hands folded neatly in their laps. But it was their faces that caused Monroe to flee the scene and alert Sheriff Thomas Weldon. According to the official report, both women had their eyes sewn shut with black thread in precise, almost surgical stitches. Sheriff Weldon arrived with 2 deputies and the county coroner, Dr. William Vaughan, the following morning. Their official documentation provides our most complete record of the scene. "The cabin appeared undisturbed," wrote Deputy Samuel Hayes in his field notes. "No signs of struggle or forced entry. The women seemed at peace, as if in sleep, were it not for the grotesque modification to their eyes. Most peculiar was the absence of blood around the stitches, suggesting the procedure was performed post-mortem, or more disturbing still, that the women remained completely still during the process." Dr. Vaughan's preliminary examination at the scene noted that both women had been dead for approximately 3 days. The cause of death was not immediately apparent, as there were no wounds, signs of strangulation, or other obvious trauma. "The most remarkable aspect of this scene," Dr. Vaughan wrote, "beyond the obvious violation of the eyes, is the perfect symmetry of the body's arrangement. The precision suggests ritual significance rather than the chaotic aftermath of violence. The sisters' bodies were transported to Asheville for proper examination, but a curious detail emerged during transport. One of the deputies, Robert Fletcher, reported that as they moved the bodies onto stretchers, he observed what appeared to be folded papers clutched in the right hand of each sister. These papers were carefully removed and preserved as evidence. The contents of these papers would not be made public for over 130 years. As Dr. Vaughan performed his examination, the background of the Blackwood sisters began to emerge through Sheriff Weldon's investigation. Elizabeth and Eleanor were the daughters of Jonathan Blackwood, a successful textile merchant who had relocated from Boston to Asheville in 1879. Their mother, Sophia Blackwood, had died during childbirth. The twins were raised primarily by their father and a series of governesses. Jonathan Blackwood had himself passed away in 1889, leaving his considerable estate to his daughters. According to town records, the sisters were well educated, having attended the prestigious Mecklenburg Female Academy in Charlotte. After completing their education, they returned to Asheville, but maintained a reclusive lifestyle, rarely engaging with local society. "The Blackwood girls always kept to themselves," recalled Margaret Harmon, who ran the local dry goods store, in a statement to the sheriff. "Polite when they came in for supplies, but never ones for conversation. Always dressed the same, always together. Some folks thought it peculiar, but they were Boston raised, and we figured that explained their reserved manner." What remained unexplained was why the sisters had been in the remote cabin where they were discovered. The property was registered to their late father, but had not been occupied for years according to local knowledge. The last confirmed sighting of the Blackwood twins in Asheville was on October 1st, 1892, when they purchased supplies from Harmon's store. "They bought more than usual that day," Margaret Harmon noted. "Candles, preserved foods, writing paper and ink. I remember asking if they were expecting company, and Elizabeth, or perhaps it was Eleanor, I could never tell them apart, said they were preparing for a long darkness. I thought she meant the coming winter. The autopsy results only deepened the mystery. Dr. Vaughan's official report, filed on October 15th, stated that both women had died from massive cardiac failure, but he could identify no obvious cause. There were no signs of poison, disease, or injury that would explain such a dramatic and simultaneous failure of both hearts. I have examined thousands of bodies in my 27 years of medical practice, Dr. Vaughan wrote, but I have never encountered deaths like these. It is as if both hearts simply decided to stop beating at the same moment. Science cannot yet explain such an occurrence. The mystery might have ended there, an unsolved but ultimately closed case of unexplained death, if not for the discovery made by Gertrude Weldon, the sheriff's wife, who had been tasked with inventorying the sisters' personal effects found at the cabin. Among these items was a small leather-bound journal, its cover unmarked except for the initials EB, which could have belonged to either sister. The journal's final entries would cast the case in an entirely new and disturbing light. I have transcribed the final pages of the journal as requested, wrote Mrs. Weldon in her report to her husband. I confess the contents have disturbed me greatly, and I would caution against sharing them widely, as they suggest either severe mental disturbance or matters beyond our understanding. The final journal entry, dated October 9, 1892, read, "Eleanor dreamed it again last night, the same as I did. We can no longer deny what is happening to us. The darkness is coming through our eyes, and soon it will devour everything. Father was right about the curse, though he thought it would skip our generation. We have made our preparations. The thread is black, as it must be. The ritual requires precision. We have practiced on the dolls until our fingers know the pattern by memory. By tomorrow night it will be done. We seal our eyes not to keep ourselves from seeing, but to keep what we've seen from escaping into the world. May God forgive us for what we've inherited." Sheriff Weldon, disturbed by these writings, ordered a more thorough investigation into the Blackwood family history. He wrote to authorities in Boston requesting information about Jonathan Blackwood and his ancestors. The response he received from Boston Police Captain James Sullivan included excerpts from old case files that suggested a troubling pattern. "In response to your inquiry," Captain Sullivan wrote, "I can confirm that the Blackwood family has a concerning history in Massachusetts. In 1831, Jeremiah Blackwood, who would be the grandfather of your deceased, was investigated in connection with the disappearance of 3 children in North Boston. Though no charges were filed due to insufficient evidence, Jeremiah subsequently relocated to Worcester under something of a cloud." Sullivan's letter continued. "More relevant, perhaps, is the case of Abigail Blackwood, Jonathan's sister and aunt to your deceased. In 1863, Abigail was committed to the state lunatic hospital at Worcester after gouging out her own eyes. According to the medical records, she claimed to be preventing the darkness from spreading. She died in the asylum 3 years later. I hope this information proves useful to your investigation." Sheriff Weldon's investigation might have continued, but a fire at the Buncombe County Courthouse in 1895 destroyed many records, including most of the documentation related to the Blackwood case. The sisters were buried in unmarked graves in the paupers section of Riverside Cemetery, and the case gradually faded from public memory. For over a century, the Blackwood sisters remained largely forgotten, their strange deaths becoming little more than a whispered legend among older Asheville residents. That changed in 2020, when University of North Carolina history professor Dr. Amelia Richardson began researching 19th-century medical anomalies in the Appalachian region. I stumbled across a reference to the Blackwood case in Dr. Vaughan's personal papers, which had been donated to the university archives, Dr. Richardson explained in her subsequent paper, published in the Journal of American Folklore. What caught my attention was the mention of the sewn eyes and the simultaneous cardiac failures. It seemed both medically implausible and culturally significant. Dr. Richardson's investigation led her to descendants of Sheriff Weldon, who had preserved family papers that included copies of some of the lost case files. Among these was a complete transcript of the Blackwood Journal, which contained entries dating back 6 months before the sisters' deaths. The journal painted a picture of 2 women who believed they were experiencing identical dreams in which they witnessed events from the distant past and frightening visions of the future. "May 18th, 1892, one entry read, "Last night we both dreamed of the Great Fire in Chicago. though neither of us was alive when it happened. Eleanor saw a woman jumping from a building with her child in her arms. I saw a man whose skin melted from his bones as he tried to save his horses. We described these visions to each other at breakfast, without first speaking of having dreamed at all. It is happening as Father warned it might. A later entry from July 3rd stated, "The visions come even in waking hours now. Today at the milliner's shop I saw the owner as she will be 3 decades hence, withered, blind, calling out for children who were not there." Eleanor touched my arm and whispered, "You see it too, don't you?" We left without making our purchase. Tonight we begin reading Father's books from the hidden shelf. The hidden shelf appeared to refer to a collection of books on occult subjects that Jonathan Blackwood had apparently kept concealed behind a false panel in his library. Dr. Richardson's research revealed that Jonathan Blackwood had corresponded with several prominent 19th-century spiritualists and occultists, including members of the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. Further investigation by Dr. Richardson led to the discovery of a letter from Jonathan Blackwood to occultist Helena Blavatsky, dated 1884, in which he wrote, "The condition appears to manifest primarily in the women of our line, typically in pairs, though it has occasionally affected isolated individuals. My great-grandmother and her sister experienced it in 1769, culminating in their joint suicide. My grandmother was spared, but my sister Abigail was not so fortunate. Now I fear for my daughters, who have already shown alarming signs of preternatural sensitivity. The local physician attributes their episodes to feminine hysteria, but I recognize the early manifestations of the Blackwood curse." The nature of this curse became clearer through entries in the Sisters' Journal from September 1892. September 3rd, Father's books speak of thin places where the veil between worlds wears down. But the Blackwood curse is not about places, but people. Our eyes are the thin places. What begins as visions becomes a doorway. The darkness from beyond seeps through, and eventually, if not stopped, will pour through entirely. Great-grandmother called it the unraveling of sight. Aunt Abigail tried to close the doorway too late. We must be more timely. September 17th. We have found the ritual in Father's oldest book. It is not written in English, but in a script neither of us recognizes, yet somehow we can read it. The ritual requires isolation, purification, and the black thread made from the wool of sheep that have grazed on graveyard grass. We know the place it must be done, Father's cabin in the hills where the boundaries are already thin. Eleanor says we should wait, try to find another way, but this morning I saw black tendrils seeping from her eyes as she slept. There is no more time. The final pages of the journal describe the sisters' preparations for what they called the sealing. They gathered specific herbs, prepared special candles made with beeswax and strange ingredients, and practiced sewing patterns on cloth dolls. The last entry, already noted by Gertrude Weldon in 1892, indicated their belief that they were not taking their lives out of madness or despair, but performing a necessary act to prevent something worse from occurring. Dr. Richardson's paper caused a minor sensation in academic circles, but the case might have remained an obscure historical footnote, if not for what happened next. During the renovation of an old property on the outskirts of Asheville in 2021, construction workers discovered a small metal box buried beneath the foundation stones. The property, records showed, had once belonged to Sheriff Thomas Weldon. The box contained several items: the original folded papers found in the hands of the Blackwood sisters, a lock of hair tied with faded ribbon, and a letter written by Sheriff Weldon dated December 25, 1892. The letter read, "I set down these events so that should the matter ever resurface, there might be some record of what truly occurred. I have not included these details in any official documentation, as they would be dismissed as the ravings of a lunatic and might damage the reputation of good Dr. Vaughan. During the autopsy of the Blackwood sisters, Dr. Vaughan made an observation he omitted from his official report at my request. Upon cutting the sutures that held the women's eyes closed, he discovered that there were no eyes in the sockets. Where the organs of sight should have been, there was only a black residue, which Vaughan described as similar to soot but with an oily consistency. More disturbing still, when exposed to air, this substance seemed to move of its own accord, causing such alarm that Dr. Vaughan immediately cauterized both sockets with a heated instrument. The papers found in the sisters' hands, which I have preserved here, contain identical messages, written in what appears to be their handwriting, though the script is curiously altered. Both read, "The doorway is closed, but not destroyed. In the year of 2 eyes and 2 mouths, the stitches will fray. Look for the twins born with 4 irises." I do not pretend to understand this message, but I could not bring myself to destroy it, despite the dread it inspires. I have told my wife that the papers contained only religious quotations, a small mercy to spare her further distress. May God grant that this mystery remains buried with the poor Blackwood girls. The discovery of this box prompted a renewed investigation into the Blackwood case by both historians and paranormal researchers. Attempts were made to locate the graves of Elizabeth and Eleanor Blackwood at Riverside Cemetery, but cemetery records from that period were incomplete, and many unmarked graves had been disturbed over the decades by flooding from the nearby French Broad River. In 2022, Dr. Richardson, continuing her research, located birth records for the Blackwood family in Boston. These records contained a curious notation beside the entry for the birth of the twins: heterochromia iridis, EB right eye green, left blue, EB left eye green, right blue, perfect mirror. This rare condition, in which a person has 2 differently colored irises, was even more unusual in its presentation in the twins, each sister having the exact opposite arrangement of eye colors from her twin. In modern medical terms, this would be called mirror image heterochromia. As Dr. Richardson's research progressed, a disturbing pattern began to emerge. She discovered similar cases throughout history, pairs of siblings, usually female, usually twins, with mirror image heterochromia, who died under mysterious circumstances, often involving self-mutilation of the eyes. These cases appeared across cultures and continents, from 17th century Japan to 19th century Hungary to early 20th century Argentina. There appears to be a recurring motif in these cases, Dr. Richardson wrote in a follow-up paper. The siblings report identical dreams or visions, followed by a growing conviction that their eyes are becoming doorways or windows for something to enter our world. The specific cultural interpretation varies, but the pattern remains consistent. In October 2023, the case took an even stranger turn when Dr. Richardson received an email from a woman named Sarah Chen, a genetic counselor at Johns Hopkins Medical Center. Chen had read Richardson's paper and reached out regarding a peculiar case that had recently come to her attention. "I have 2 patients, twin girls born in 2022, who present with perfect mirror image heterochromia," Chen wrote. "During a routine examination, we discovered that both girls have a rare genetic anomaly on chromosome 6 that we've never documented before. When I searched medical literature for similar cases, I found nothing. But when I expanded my search to historical records, I came across your paper on the Blackwood sisters." Chen went on to note that the twins had been born on October 10, 2022, exactly 130 years after the deaths of Elizabeth and Eleanor Blackwood. The girl's mother had family roots in North Carolina, though she had no knowledge of any connection to the Blackwood family. "What concerns me," Chen continued, "is that the parents report both girls often wake screaming at the same moment in the night, and both have begun describing identical dreams. Dreams of the ladies with sewn eyes who whisper warnings." Dr. Richardson immediately traveled to Baltimore to meet with Chen, and if possible, the family of the twins. What she discovered there would lead her down an even darker path of investigation, one that continues to this day. The parents of the twins, Michael and Jennifer Reed, were initially reluctant to meet with Dr. Richardson, concerned about subjecting their daughters to what they perceived as unnecessary attention. However, when Chen explained the potential historical and medical significance, they agreed to a brief interview. "The dream started on their first birthday," Jennifer Reed explained, her voice tense with worry. "Both girls woke up screaming at exactly 3:15 in the morning. When we went to check on them, they were sitting up in their cribs pointing at the same empty corner of the nursery. As they've gotten older and learned to speak, they've started describing what they see." Michael Reed, the girl's father, appeared more skeptical. "Kids have nightmares. Twins often develop similar behaviors. There's probably a rational explanation for all of this." Jennifer, however, was less certain. "Last month, Abby told me about a dream where ladies with black strings in their eyes told her and Emma that they have the same windows. The next morning, Emma drew this without having spoken to Abby about the dream. She showed Dr. Richardson a child's drawing that depicted two stick figures with exaggerated eyes that had black lines crossing them like stitches. When Dr. Richardson asked if she could meet the twins, the Reeds initially refused, but eventually agreed to a brief supervised introduction. The meeting took place in the family's living room, with both parents present. 4-year-old Abigail and Emma Reed appeared to be typical healthy children. They were identical except for their eyes. Abigail's right eye was deep brown, her left blue, while Emma's left eye was brown and her right blue. They were shy at first, but gradually warmed to Dr. Richardson's gentle questioning about their dreams. "The ladies aren't scary," Abigail said when asked about the figures in her dreams. "They're sad because they can see the dark things coming. They say we have to be careful because our eyes are special windows," Emma added, "and windows can let bad things in if you don't close them right." Before Dr. Richardson could ask another question, Emma turned to look directly at her and said, in a voice that Jennifer Reed would later describe as not belonging to my daughter, "They say you found the box, but not the book. The real book is under the third stone by the water. If you don't find it before the dark knows you're looking, it will be too late." Immediately after speaking these words, both girls complained of headaches, and the interview was terminated. Dr. Richardson left with more questions than answers, and a growing sense of unease about the parallels between the Reed twins and the historical cases she had been researching. Following the meeting with the Reed family, Dr. Richardson returned to Asheville, determined to make sense of Emma's cryptic message. The third stone by the water could refer to countless locations, but Richardson focused on sites connected to the original Blackwood case. The cabin where the sisters had died had long since been reclaimed by the forest, but historical maps showed it had been located near a small tributary of the French Broad River. In December 2023, Dr. Richardson organized an expedition to the approximate location, accompanied by 2 graduate students and an archaeologist colleague, Dr. Marcus Jenkins. "We had very little to go on," Dr. Jenkins later reported. "The cabin's foundation had completely disappeared, and over a century of forest growth and erosion had dramatically changed the landscape. We were essentially looking for a needle in a haystack." After 3 days of fruitless searching, the team was preparing to abandon the effort when one of the graduate students, Thomas Wyatt, discovered what appeared to be a deliberate arrangement of stones near the riverbank. 3 flat stones had been positioned in a row, partially concealed by decades of accumulated soil and vegetation. The third stone was different from the others, Wyatt recalled. It was perfectly square, almost like it had been cut, while the others were more naturally shaped. When we lifted it, we found a small cavity underneath that contained a metal cylinder, the type used for protecting documents in the 19th century. Inside the cylinder was a slim volume, bound in what appeared to be black leather. The book contained approximately 60 pages of text, written in a language none of the team could identify. Interspersed with the text were intricate diagrams of eyes, astronomical configurations, and anatomical drawings of the human brain with curious annotations. The book was carefully transported back to the University of North Carolina for analysis. Initial carbon dating suggested it originated in the mid-18th century, consistent with the period when the Blackwood family first began documenting their unusual condition. Dr. Evelyn Morris, a linguist specializing in obscure European languages, was consulted to analyze the text. After several weeks of study, she reported a disturbing conclusion. "The text is not written in any known historical language," Dr. Morris stated in her report. "It appears to be a constructed script that incorporates elements of several ancient languages, including Etruscan, early Semitic scripts, and certain ideographic systems. More disturbing is that portions of the text seem to shift when viewed peripherally, characters rearranging themselves when not directly observed. I cannot offer a scientific explanation for this phenomenon." Despite the challenges, Dr. Morris was able to partially translate the title page and several key passages. The book appeared to be called The Inheritance of Sight, or possibly The Legacy of Seeing, and detailed a condition that affected certain bloodlines throughout history. According to the translated passages, individuals born with heterochromia in mirrored pairs possessed a rare genetic anomaly that made their eyes function not just as organs of sight, but as potential apertures between dimensions. The book described this condition as both a gift and a terrible curse, allowing the affected to perceive beyond normal human limitations, but also creating vulnerability to what it called the entities between spaces. The text outlined the progression of the condition, beginning with shared dreams, advancing to waking visions, then to physical manifestations of shadow matter leaking through the eyes, and finally to full possession by extra-dimensional consciousnesses. The final stage, if not prevented, supposedly resulted in the complete replacement of our reality with the place behind perception. The book also detailed the ritual the Blackwood sisters had apparently performed, a process called the sealing, that involved specific preparations and the careful closure of the eyes using thread made from specific materials. This ritual was described as a sacrifice that prevented the final stage of the condition, but at the cost of the affected individuals' lives. Most disturbing was a passage that seemed to predict future occurrences. The pattern repeats in cycles of 6 and 30. When the century turns twice, the door that was sealed will be challenged again. 2 mirrors of sight will be born into the world in the year of the repeated number. They will dream of those who came before. They will see what waits between. The choice will be theirs, as it was for all who inherited the sight. Dr. Richardson immediately connected this passage to the Reed twins, born in 2022, a year of repeated number 2, and experiencing dreams of those who came before. In January 2024, Dr. Richardson attempted to contact the Reed family again to share her discoveries, only to learn that they had moved without leaving a forwarding address. Dr. Chen at Johns Hopkins reported that the family had abruptly cancelled all further appointments and could not be reached. Concerned for the welfare of the twins, Dr. Richardson filed a report with Baltimore police, requesting a welfare check. The police reported back that the Reed family home had indeed been vacated, but there were no signs of foul play or hasty departure. Neighbors indicated the family had mentioned relocating for work reasons, though none could specify where they had gone. Dr. Richardson's concerns deepened when she discovered, through property records, that Michael Reed had purchased a remote cabin in the mountains of western North Carolina, less than 20 miles from where the Blackwood sisters had died in 1892. In February 2024, Dr. Richardson and Thomas Wyatt drove to the location indicated in the property records. The cabin was situated at the end of a long, unpaved road surrounded by dense forest. There was no sign of the Reed family's vehicle, and the cabin appeared unoccupied. "We debated whether to approach the cabin directly," Wyatt later wrote in his field notes. Dr. Richardson was concerned about potential legal issues of trespassing, but also deeply worried about the twins, based on the historical patterns we had documented. The decision was made for them when, as they sat in their car discussing options, the front door of the cabin opened, and Jennifer Reed emerged. She spotted their vehicle immediately and walked toward them, her expression unreadable. "You found us," she said, when Dr. Richardson rolled down her window. "The girls said you would. They've been expecting you." Jennifer Reed's appearance was dramatically changed from their previous meeting. She appeared exhausted, with dark circles under her eyes and a nervous tension in her movements. She invited them into the cabin, explaining that Michael had gone to town for supplies and would return shortly. Inside, the cabin was sparsely furnished but clean and well-maintained. The twins were sitting at a small table, drawing with colored pencils. They looked up simultaneously when Dr. Richardson entered, their mismatched eyes focusing on her with an intensity that seemed beyond their years. "You found the book," Abigail said. "It wasn't a question. We tried to run away from it," Emma added, "but it followed us here. Mommy says this is where we need to be to make it stop." Jennifer Reed explained that in the months following their meeting with Dr. Richardson, both girls had begun experiencing increasingly disturbing visions, not just in dreams but during waking hours. They described seeing shadows with teeth and people with darkness instead of faces moving around their home in Baltimore. "Michael thought they were just having night terrors, that I was encouraging their delusions by paying too much attention to them," Jennifer said. "But then he saw it too, a shape in the hallway outside the girls' bedroom, something that wasn't anything that should exist." The final straw, Jennifer explained, came when both girls woke screaming one night, their pillows covered in a black, oily substance that seemed to have seeped from their eyes while they slept. Medical tests could not identify the substance. After that, the girls started talking about coming here, to the mountains where the ladies had gone before. They said we needed to find the same cabin, but when we researched the Blackwood story online and tried to find the location, we discovered it was long gone. This was the closest property available. When asked why they had cut off contact with Dr. Chen and disappeared without notification, Jennifer became defensive. What would you have had us do? Tell doctors our daughters are leaking black goo from their eyes and seeing interdimensional monsters. They'd have taken our children away. Michael lost his job because he couldn't sleep, couldn't focus. We cashed in our retirement savings to buy this place. We had no choice. As Jennifer spoke, Dr. Richardson noticed that the twins had stopped drawing and were staring at something behind her. When she turned to look, there was nothing there. They're getting stronger, Emma said quietly. The stitches are coming loose. Jennifer hurriedly explained that the girls had been referring to stitches and seams for weeks, though neither she nor Michael understood what they meant. When shown the book Dr. Richardson had discovered, Jennifer reported that both girls had described seeing a similar book in their dreams. I don't know what to do, Jennifer confessed, her voice breaking. The doctors can't help us. The church couldn't help us. Are we supposed to believe that some curse from the 1800s is coming for our daughters? That they're seeing through some kind of dimensional tear? It's insane. The conversation was interrupted by the sound of a vehicle approaching. Michael Reed had returned from town. His reaction to finding Dr. Richardson and Wyatt in his home was initially hostile, but after Jennifer explained the situation, he reluctantly joined the conversation. I was a structural engineer, Michael said. I believed in what I could see, measure, test. Now, he gestured helplessly around him. Now I'm living in a cabin in the middle of nowhere because my daughters see things that shouldn't exist and talk like characters in a horror movie. I don't know what's happening to my family. Dr. Richardson shared what she had learned from the book and her historical research, explaining the pattern that seemed to be repeating with the Reed twins. Michael remained skeptical, suggesting psychological explanations, until Abigail suddenly spoke in that same adult voice Emma had used during their previous meeting. The darkness finds the cracks between worlds, she said, her mismatched eyes fixed on middle distance. It has no shape of its own, so it wants ours. The ladies in our dreams closed their windows before it could come through. They want us to understand how to close ours. But we don't want to die like they did, Daddy, Emma added in her normal child's voice, tears welling in her eyes. The revelation that the sealing ritual described in the book had resulted in death created an immediate crisis. Michael Reed ordered Dr. Richardson and Wyatt to leave, accusing them of putting dangerous ideas into his daughters' heads. Despite Jennifer's protests, they were escorted from the property with a warning never to return. Dr. Richardson immediately contacted local authorities, expressing concern for the children's welfare, but without evidence of abuse or neglect, there was little they could do beyond conducting a routine check. The officer who visited reported that the family appeared stressed, but the children showed no signs of mistreatment. For 2 weeks, Dr. Richardson attempted to maintain contact with the Reeds through email and phone calls, offering to connect them with specialists who might help. Her messages went unanswered. Then, on March 15, 2024, she received a text message from Jennifer Reed's phone that contained only geographic coordinates and the words, "Come now, please." The coordinates led to a location deep in the Pisgah National Forest, miles from any road. Dr. Richardson, against the advice of her colleagues, organized an immediate expedition, accompanied by Thomas Wyatt and 2 local guides familiar with the terrain. The 4-hour hike through difficult territory brought them to a small clearing where they found the Reed family's SUV abandoned, with no sign of its occupants. A search of the immediate area revealed a barely visible trail leading further into the forest. Following it for another mile, the group came upon a scene that would later feature in headlines across the country. In a small natural hollow surrounded by ancient oak trees, Michael and Jennifer Reed lay unconscious on the ground. Between them sat the twins, facing each other, holding hands. All 4 family members were alive but unresponsive, even to painful stimuli. There was no obvious cause for their condition, no signs of injury, exposure, or substances that might have rendered them unconscious. The scene appeared ritualistic, with small candles, now extinguished, placed at the cardinal points around the family, and unfamiliar symbols drawn on the ground with what appeared to be charcoal. Emergency medical services were called, requiring a helicopter evacuation due to the remote location. All 4 Reed family members were transported to Mission Hospital in Asheville, where they remained in unexplained comas for 9 days. During this period, extensive medical testing revealed no physical cause for their condition, though all four showed unusual brain activity patterns that neurologists described as consistent with states of deep meditation or certain psychedelic experiences. On the 10th day, Michael and Jennifer Reed awoke within minutes of each other. Both were disoriented but physically unharmed. The twins, however, remained unconscious, their vital signs stable but showing no signs of waking. When sufficiently recovered, Michael and Jennifer provided statements to both medical personnel and investigating officers. Their accounts aligned precisely, describing how the twins had led them to the location, claiming it was where the ladies had tried their ritual before. According to the Reeds, the girls had insisted that there was another way besides the fatal sealing described in the book. They said the ladies didn't know there was an alternative, Jennifer Reed stated in her interview, that they could close the windows without closing their lives. The girls had been drawing the ritual for days. The symbols, the arrangement, everything. We were desperate enough to try it. The ritual, as the Reeds described it, involved the four of them forming a circle and the twins reciting words they claimed to have learned from the ladies in their dreams. Neither parent could recall the exact phrasing, describing it as sounds more than words. The last thing both remembered was a sensation of falling inward before losing consciousness. On March 30th, 2024, after 16 days of unexplained coma, Abigail and Emma Reed awoke. Hospital staff noted an immediate and striking change. Both girls now had brown eyes. The heterochromia that had marked them since birth had disappeared overnight. Medical testing confirmed that this was not the result of colored contacts or any temporary change. Somehow, the genetic condition that had given each twin one blue and one brown eye had been altered. Geneticists who analyzed blood samples before and after this change found subtle but definite alterations in the gene sequences associated with eye color. When asked about what had happened in the forest, both girls provided similar accounts of meeting the ladies with the sewn eyes in what they described as the place between sleeping and waking. According to the twins, the Blackwood sisters had shown them a different way to close the windows, not by sealing their physical eyes, but by changing the genetic pattern that had made their eyes vulnerable in the first place. "The bad shadows can't find us anymore," Abigail explained to Dr. Richardson, who was permitted to interview the girls after their recovery. "Our windows don't look into their place now. The ladies are still there, in the in-between place," Emma added. "They've been keeping the shadows busy so they wouldn't find other kids like us, but they're very tired." When Dr. Richardson asked if there were other children like them, other pairs with mirrored heterochromia, both girls nodded solemnly. "All over," Abigail said. "Some of them don't know yet what their eyes can do." "The ladies said you have to find the others before the shadows do," Emma continued. "They said to tell you to look for the twins in Arizona. Their windows are starting to open." The Reed family left the hospital on April 5th, declining further interviews or testing. They did not return to their cabin, but relocated to an undisclosed location. Before leaving, Jennifer Reed provided Dr. Richardson with copies of the girls' drawings and notes from the weeks leading up to the incident, hoping they might help identify other children at risk. These materials included precise depictions of the ritual performed in the forest clearing, diagrams that bore striking similarities to those in the ancient book, but with crucial differences. Where the original sealing required the physical closure of the eyes, this alternative focused on what the girls had called changing the pattern inside, apparently referring to the genetic alteration that had occurred during their coma. Dr. Richardson, together with a growing team of researchers from various disciplines, has spent the past 6 months analyzing these materials and continuing to investigate historical cases similar to the Blackwood sisters. Their work has identified 3 additional pairs of twins with mirror image heterochromia in the United States, including 2 siblings in Arizona, as the Reed twins had mentioned. Contact has been established with the families of these children, and monitoring protocols have been implemented to watch for signs of the progression described in both the historical record and the Reed's experience. Research into potential genetic interventions based on the changes observed in the Reed twins is ongoing, though the precise mechanism remains poorly understood. Dr. Richardson's most recent paper, currently under peer review, proposes a theoretical framework that attempts to reconcile these events with our understanding of physics and biology. She suggests that certain genetic patterns may create what she terms perceptual vulnerabilities, points where human consciousness can interact with aspects of reality normally filtered out by standard sensory processing. We know that human perception represents an extremely narrow band of available sensory information. Dr. Richardson writes, "We cannot see the vast majority of the electromagnetic spectrum, cannot hear most sound frequencies, cannot detect the majority of particles that pass through our bodies every second. Is it so implausible that certain genetic variations might expand perceptual capabilities beyond normal human ranges? And if so, what might be perceived in those expanded ranges? What might perceive us in return?" The Blackwood sisters remain buried in unmarked graves somewhere in Riverside Cemetery. The cabin where they performed their fatal ritual has long since returned to the earth. But the question they sought to answer, what lies beyond human perception and what happens when that boundary is breached, continues to trouble those who have encountered their story. In the mountains of North Carolina, local residents report occasionally seeing two identical young women in white walking among the trees at twilight. They are always described the same way, pale with dark hair walking hand in hand, and always inevitably those who claim to have seen these figures mention one disturbing detail. The women never turn to face observers, but those who have glimpsed them from the side say that where their eyes should be there appears to be only darkness, crossed with what might be thread. Perhaps, as the Reed twins suggested, Elizabeth and Eleanor Blackwood are still there, in what they called the place between sleeping and waking, standing guard at a doorway they sealed with their own lives. Perhaps they are still watching through eyes long closed, for others who share their curse or their gift. Or perhaps the truth is something science has yet to comprehend, that what we perceive as reality is merely the visible surface of something far more vast and strange, and some are born with eyes that see too much for human minds to bear. The investigation continues, the pattern unfolds, and somewhere perhaps another pair of children with mismatched eyes begins to dream of ladies with sewn eyes who whisper warnings of the darkness between worlds. Trust in the Lord with all your heart. Only through Jesus Christ can we find true protection from the darkness that lurks beyond human perception. May His light guide us through even the most unfathomable mysteries of this world and the next.